Hi everyone, my name is Andi Vax, and our today's conversation will be about compression. The compression is a very paradoxical thing. On the one hand, the entire theory of compression placed on a sheet of A4. On the other hand, every day I receive dozens of demo records, and I understand that people who read the theory completely don't understand how to use it on practice. So, short and briefly about the compression. At the very beginning was a tube. That's why first compressors were created based on vacuum tubes. For me, tube compressor has two general parameters. Long attack, about 15 milliseconds, and specific color of sound, soft low frequencies and velvet high frequencies. Big thick sound is tube compression. As time went on, technology has evolved and was invented a semiconductor transistor. All previous devices were converted with new technology's help. That's how transistor compressor was appeared. First of all, for me, transistor compressor is quick attack, about 1 millisecond, and aggressive mid-frequency sound. As the era of digital technology began, sound engineers increasingly started to use digital processors and plugins, which work on mathematical formulas. By using it, they were able to achieve very quick attack, about 1 microsecond, and completely uncolored signal that can be used, for example, for mastering. Compressor continuously determines level of the input signal, and if it exceeds the predetermined value, the compressor activates and reduces it to a certain value. Reading boring mathematical definition of compression, we can see that it is the narrowing of the dynamic range of the signal. Let me explain. When we use compressor for audio material, we make loud signal peaks quieter, and quiet peaks make louder. As a result, the signal becomes more dense and controllable. On the other hand, when we set up a compressor, for example attack time, signal peaks can be snappy or sluggish. This is the paradox of device called a compressor. This device dramatically affects the signal dynamics. Let's consider the basic controls of the compressor. There are only 4: attack, release, ratio and threshold. Attack and release are measured in micro and milliseconds. It depends on type of compressor. Ratio is a relative one. Threshold is measured in decibels. Attack parameter controls speed of operation of the compressor. Simply put, the quicker attack, the faster the compressor works and the sooner cut off the original signal peaks. The slower compression attack, the slower it works, and we hear that signal peaks are left untouched. Release controls the time when the compressor stops to affect the dynamics of the signal and lets it go, to repeat the cycle of the compressor, which begins with the attack. And it is repeated in a circle until the compressor receives input signal. Attack and release parameters have to complete its cycle. Note that the value of the release directly depends on the wavelength of the signal, or in other words, on its frequency. Then the frequency is lower, the release must be slower to avoid distortion during compression. Please note that in a lot of hardware instruments and plugins we can see the value of release called auto, or simply automatic. In each device this autopilot works by its own way unique algorithm. Simply in auto mode, the compressor chooses of optimal release values. But you have to remember that in the most cases this value will be more than 100 milliseconds. If you want to get pumped up loud sound, which is achieved by a small value of the parameter release, try not to use an auto value. Ratio controls the amount of signal compression. With 1:1 ratio value, compression is not performed at all. When you increase ratio parameter, compressor affects dynamics of the signal more and more. Threshold parameter is a very simple to understand. If we lower threshold parameter in decibels, the more signal peaks engaged and processed by the compressor. Knee parameter often has two positions, hard knee and soft knee, or a slider that allows you to seamlessly manage knee compression. Flatter knee gives you more accurate and unobtrusive character of the compressor. Sometimes we can use smooth or discrete control peak RMS. The peak responds to the signal peaks. That's a classic case. RMS is the rated maximum sinusoidal value of the volume. Simply put, the detector analyzes the entire signal by a certain mathematical formula. As a result of the compressor is running very musical and unnoticeable. Definitely, RMS mode is designed for non-visible compression. Peak mode is much more audible and is often used for obtaining special effects. Also, newbies have question about what is dual mono compressor. The answer is simple. Usually we work with mono or stereo compressor. Mono compressor is a single channel device. Stereo compressor respectively 2 channels. But the problem is that often in stereo compressors signal detector works at the same time with left and right channel. In practice, we call this collapse of the stereo base. We can note the artificial narrowing of the stereo panorama after treatment. As an option to get rid of this shortcoming, dual mono compression. As a result, each channel has its peak detector and each channel is compressed separately, which leads to the preservation of a wide stereo base. There are devices allowing to carry out mid-side compression, or it is 2 compressors in single device. One of them works with mid, you can call it mono component of signal, and another one works with side, or you can call it stereo component of signal. In general, mid-side audio processing used in the mastering. When we talk about simple understanding of compression as a process, I often mean something like stylist work. He removes amount of hair more in one place and less in another. But in general, you can see a perfect haircut without flaws. The same thing is in the mix. All sounds have to be distinctly controlled. They should not stick out or buggle out of the mix. There is a lot of sounds in our world. That's why it is necessary to talk about when and why will we use the compressor. I always use the compressor for following cases. 1. Signal dynamics control. 2. Creative compression. 3. Giving character using hardware compressor emulations. 4. Glue a few instruments or mix. 5. Multiband compression. 6. Special cases of compression: gate and expander, de-esser, limiter and maximizer. 7. Parallel compression. 8. Outboard compressor during recording. Speaking about the control of dynamics, I mean the most accurate mix without bulging out instruments. As a rule, accuracy is a small attack time, about 1 millisecond, and time of release more than 100 milliseconds. Don't forget the small ratio from 2:1 to 4:1. Creative compression is using extreme settings of the compressor. Also, for example, using compressor in the sense after the reverb in sidechain mode. Let's create channel with the reverb effect. 100% wet signal. Send the sound to the aux channel that we will not hear, but it will be the controlling signal for the compressor, which creates effect of departure reverb tail in places where lead doesn't sound. Using different hardware devices or their digital emulations as plugins, we deliberately distort signal. These distortions are called coloring, and listener likes it. The sound seems to be full and loud. While listening hate records, we often realize that certain groups of instruments or the whole makes sounds together, like it were glued. Also, it is achieved by using compressor. but group of instruments or the whole mix are compressed. Try to compress not only individual instruments, but instrument groups. For example, kick and bass to work better together. Multiband compression is different because of the processing signal divides on some of bands. Each of them is processed separately by the compressor. As a result, we can compress the sound more accurately and unnoticeable. I recommend using a multiband compression for vocal and drums group. I also know a lot of fans that use multiband compressor on master bass, but I always try to compress each instrument separately, rather rudely change the balance of the mix, as a result of using multiband compressor on master bass. Speaking of compression, it is worth mentioning of its use in special cases. Expander is a compressor conversely. When compressor reduces the dynamic range, the expander increases the signal level that exceeds the threshold value. The most frequently expander is used for restoration of audio tracks, which have killed picks because of unskillful compression. Expander also uses in cases when you want to emphasize the low frequency tail of the kick. Gate is another special case of compression. This device, which passes a signal only if it's level above a predetermined threshold. More often, gate is used to remove noise in the pauses, vocalist breathing, and reverb tails. Often gate is used as an creative effect, when the gate is controlled by a signal from the outside. Having a channel with its one sound, we can make it sound rhythmically, just using aux input gate. Quite often used frequency-dependent compressor. Almost everyone knows concept of De-esser. This device is a conventional compressor which only works on a certain frequency and is used to remove from the signal hissing sounds such as s and sh. As a rule, the functional of de-essers is not rich. The main thing is to be careful not make a vocalist lisping.
Сегодня, 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 сегодня.
Limiter and maximizer. What are these devices and how they work with compression? Limiter is a special case of compression. It is considered when a ratio is 10:1, the peaks of the signal virtually stop to exceed the threshold and cut off. That is why the name of such device is limiter, but in fact it is the same compressor, but only extreme tuned. Maximizer is a very complicated thing for theorists. Not the last role is played by the fact that producers of hardware call their devices maximizer, for example BB Sonic Maximizer. Also, different developers call their devices with the same functions different terms. For example, Voxengo Elephant Master Bus Limiter and Waves L1 Ultra Maximizer. Parallel compression is a dream for each producer. You can copy the drum part and apply it to a very rigid compression with a quick attack plus equalized flattened result and mix with a dry signal. The result will exceed all expectations. This method can be also used for vocals when signal dynamic is a very jumpy and quiet phrases sink into the mix. Very often people ask me whether or not need an external compressor for recording vocals in their home studio. My answer is unequivocally yes. Here I highlight two main points. Peaks compression in a vocalist load passages when audio interface tract is overloaded and the signal is limited to the peak, distorted. As in solution, record the vocalist putting the gain value to minimum, but ratio between signal and noise is clearly not in our favor. Much better is to use a compressor while recording, that will suppress unnecessary peaks and prevent distortion when recording. Also for me important factor is signal color when recording. Just compare the recorded vocals directly into the audio interface with the recording through the tube compressor, which essentially distorts the sound, but that sounds very musical.
It's a feeling we call insane. Here and now we found it. Pull me up if I lose my faith in the freedom inside me. It's a feeling we call insane. Here and now we found it. Pull me up if I lose my faith in the freedom inside me.
Please note that in some cases we must make a record the most honest and close to the original. We do it, for example, in acoustic measurements premises. Everyone wants to know the secret of compressor settings. 4 magical letters ARRT: attack, release, ratio, threshold. In that order, we will set up compressor controls. First, set up the values in the following provisions: attack to minimum, release to minimum, ratio to maximum, threshold in extreme position where signal compression is about 20 decibels. This is the starting point of reference for any sound, whether it is super expensive monitors or laptop speaker. With follow adjustment of the parameters, we will clearly hear this effect on the sound. Start adjustment in the same order, ARRT. Think what we need as a result of sound and start to twist the knobs. Attack. The quicker attack, the earlier works the compressor and more we get a smooth signal in the output. The slower attack, the more peaks pass compressor and the more clicks and punches we obtain in output. Release. The quicker release, more loud and pumped up sound in output of the compressor. The greater release, more quiet and dynamically equalized signal we get. Ratio. Lift to high value 10:1 and above for special effect of sound, and low values 4:1 to equalize the dynamics of individual instruments, and very low 2:1 and 1.5:1 for invisible compression, for example in the mastering. Threshold. Use it as you want, by analogy with the parameter ratio. High extreme values for the special effects and low values for accurate compression. The main advantage of this method ARRT is adequacy of settings attack and release, which in my opinion is the main difficulty in the practical use of the compressor. Whole problem is in the fact that the authors of articles and videos about compression offer us an already existing recipes of processing at predetermined attack-release ratio and threshold. But the music is not mathematics. Let's look at it from the other side. Just imagine what sound as the result we need. Represent the whole picture of the entire mix with all the treatments and effects. But this work for professionals. We divide our sound to 4 components of compression: attack, release, ratio, threshold. It's easy. No more presets or prescription of punch drums. Listen to original sound. Imagine the desired structure of the sound. For example, everyone knows that Andi Vax loves drums punch. Okay, more attack. We deal with dance music, so you can add a little special effect, pump-up sound. Make quicker release, but do all by ear. No magic recipes and mathematical formulas for calculating release time depends on BPM of the track. For drums, enough ratio is 4:1. A lower value will not give the desired effect. More, it's just not good. The drums begin to eat themselves, and the breeze of the track will be lost. Change threshold also orally. Don't forget to compensate volume falling because of compression in output of the device, to make it convenient to compare signal before compression and after. And before using compressor for punch, think about using envelope shaper instead of compressor, which can often give almost identical results with minimum of time spent. Another case, we have synthesizer track. We don't need punch, we need to make it more smooth and control dynamically. Listen to the original sound. Stop. Use your imagination and decide what kind of sound would be relevant here and now. As a result, attack is about 1 to 3 milliseconds, release 100 milliseconds or auto, ratio 2:1. Threshold no more than 5 decibels of compression. With more compression we have significantly interfere with the sound, which in this case is not required. Often in dance music we use the way when several different instruments are sent to one group or bus and are compressed. This allows to achieve fused and solid sound. And finally, what can provide compression on vocals? Let's consider two fundamentally different approaches to the sound. The first one, Jigan, the track Truth. In this track, Jigan's manner of execution is just super, and compression can stress the artist's charisma and create the energy of the track. For Jigan's vocal I used Universal Audio Fatso compressor. I choose Fatso because there is a special controller that adds distortion to the sound and makes this sound more colorful.
Но они рождают мысли искренне чистыми. Но они рождают мысли искренне чистыми. Но они рождают мысли искренне чистыми. Но они рождают мысли искренне чистыми.
And now diametrically opposite approach to vocal compression with the same musical style. When I talked with Yarmak, I realized that the main message of his music is to be closer to the listener. Vocals should sound very natural and close, so I decided to use the most invisible compressor, LA2A. Compressor cuts off 2 to 3 decibels of peaks and works very accurately. Also remember that the LA2A is a tube device, which adds a nice vocal sound character, make it more dense and round.
Этот трек не будет в чартах и рвать хит-парады, но если хоть 100 людей воспримет, то я буду рады, независимо от цифр прочего псевдодостатка. Главная задача сказать тем, кто развернет палатки. Воин или клоун, и где твое поле боя? Встанешь на колени или гордо расстреляет стоя? Идешь в толпе или же пастух для стада? Ведешь на верную тропу или к воротам ада?
Very often I use compressors to make sound with character. Tube devices make the sounds more thick and dense. Most pop singers are recorded exactly in the two preamps. Transistor adds aggressive mids, and even weak emo vocalist will sound through such a device far more serious than directly to the audio interface. Among digital emulations of compressors that color the sound, I would pick Universal Audio, Waves, Softtube, Slate Digital, and Plugin Alliance. Let's consider the most common mistakes using the compressor. Mistake 1. The most common mistake. Overcompression or incorrect use of threshold and ratio. Let's imagine that speaker woofer varies when it receives signal. Many peaks gives us a strong wobble of speaker woofer. This is punch. To compress signal and woofer stuck. It doesn't work, punch is lost, breathing in the track is lost. Mistake 2. Another common mistake is incorrect setup of attack and release. It is just matter of experience. Experienced producer just hears that attack and release settings are not correct. Also notice that many music styles dictate their own rules to configure these settings of the compressor. Mistake 3. The same values of compression on all instruments. Here, as you can see, the principle of contrasts doesn't work, so we can try to compress different instruments in different ways, and for sure it will work. Mistake 4. When people do not use the compressor at all. Maybe it will work in classical music styles, but in modern and especially dance genres, compression is required. Just because the listener's ear is not used to hear uncontrolled. Use compressors. Colleagues, remember, each device can play both the pros and cons. So do not let your brain get stuck and your ears blurry. I ask you to take breaks at work and also use of reference tracks to refresh your perception. Thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and watch fresh reviews. If you have any questions, you can ask about it in my conference at Facebook, Andi Vax Reviews. My name is Andi Vax, until the new mixes. Please leave comments about what you would like to watch in my next review. Comments with a large number of likes will be considered at first place. And domo arigato, Mr. Roboto.